Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Great to see you all this morning. Lovely to see the church full. It's half empty now. All the kids and youth have gone, but it's still great to see all the adults left behind. Great to see you. And big welcome to those who are joining us online for this time of teaching as we continue our series, Living a Liberated Life. To start off, I want to talk to you this morning about gardening. Have we got any keen gardeners here in the room? Oh, yeah, there's a few there. Forgive me. I am definitely not one of the keen gardeners in the room at all. And I'm going more for the environmentally friendly rewilding of my garden. Now, some of you might say, David, you're just lazy, and you're probably right, but I'm letting nature take its course. You know, it's Chernobyl in my garden. Basically, let's see the wolves and everything come back in there. That's what I'm going for. And really, the only thing I do in the gardening department is mowing the lawn. And I only enjoy mowing the lawn when it's down the middle. Because of my rewilding policy, anywhere near the edges, it's a battle. It's a wrestle. Gets tangled up the branches. I'm holding a branch away from my head, trying to get a mower in there, or the roots are getting in there. It's an absolute nightmare. And you come out sweating and exhausted because of the wrestle. Just trying to mow the lawn because of my environmentally friendly rewilding policy in my garden. And I just thought, wow, isn't that a picture of life sometimes? We just want to get the job done. We just want to be cruising along with the engine in our lawnmower and do the task in front of us. And there's this stuff reaching in to grab you and cause you to battle and wrestle. And it's draining, it's exhausting. This is exactly what we're talking about this morning as we zoom in on living a liberated life. How tangled up is your life this morning? Forgive me, but I don't seem to have a clicker today for the PowerPoint. Should I? Well, you guys going to do it for me? Oh, brilliant. Look at that. No hands this morning. Fantastic. So 3 things we're going to look at to help us disentangle our lives, to get that sort of break, if you like. 3 things we're looking at. First of all, we need to be able to look back. As we look back, we see people who have lived a disentangled life. People who are free, people who are liberated, and we get our inspiration from them and learn lessons from them. Secondly, I'd encourage you to look out. Read the warning signs, see what's coming, and then act upon that in order to have that freer life. And thirdly, as Mark has emphasized this morning, we need to look ahead. Look to Jesus, the one who has completed the life race that God gave him. So that's where we're going to go this morning, and hopefully it'll be another click, and we're going to use the sermon of Hebrews in order to help us unpack this a little bit. It's a letter or a message written in our latter part of our Bibles, and actually it was a sermon that was sent out to many of the synagogues in the Roman Empire in the 1st century. Round about AD 70, the Romans destroyed Jerusalem and the temple. That sense of institution was ripped away from the Jewish people. And so this message went out to the synagogue saying, do you know what? We know that institution was important. We know it added security. We know it was a framework for many generations for our people. But actually, Jesus is a better way. Jesus is more secure. Jesus is superior. Let's look to Jesus and run the race with him is the challenge. And we can empathize a little bit with that, with the loss of our queen. I haven't known any other royal sovereign apart from the queen, and suddenly she's gone. And so we're hopeful about King Charles, but we just don't know, do we? We just knew she was so secure in her faith. And so that was a foundation for us, but it's gone. But we can be challenged. There is the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. He is the one we look to. He is the one we count on. And if we click again, we're going to see the context of Hebrews chapter 11. The hall of fame, the hall of faith, if you like. All these people from the Old Testament, the Hebrew scriptures, who somehow lived a great life of faith. And it's a powerful chapter because for many of these people, life didn't quite work out the way they planned or hoped. They didn't get the answers to prayer. They didn't see the fulfillments of the promises. They went through disease. They went through death. They went through struggles. And it wasn't some kind of happy-clappy Christianity. It was this ongoing, enduring Christianity That faith in God, where no matter what was chucked at them here on earth, they shone, they endured, they kept going. And that's why they were included in this hall of faith, this hall of fame, to be a shining testimony. And the writer to Hebrews is saying, yeah, look back, be encouraged. You have so many more resources in this era after Jesus. Go for it with the encouragement of those who've gone before. And so if we click again, we're going to get stuck into the verses Mark read for us earlier. Hebrews 11, verse 39, starting the process of looking back. All these people earned a good reputation, so all the people from Hebrews chapter 11, because of their faith, yet none of them received all that God had promised. So a question for you to start thinking about this. Who has inspired you in your life race, in your faith? Who has inspired you? Who has encouraged you as you look back at your life journey? Was it a parent, a mum or a dad, a grandparent, an auntie, an uncle? Was there a youth leader or somebody who just came alongside you? The writer to the Hebrews is embracing this mentality, saying, look, there are walking, talking, living examples. There are also people from the past who can inspire us to run this race. People who are basically saying, do you know what? God is faithful. The life of faith is the better way. It's worth living the life of faith despite not receiving all that God had promised. Basically, these people were living for the future. You know, you think of Abraham, the promise to be a great and mighty nation, never saw it. Think of Moses, lead the people into the promised land, never got in there. Plenty of examples in the Bible of people not living for themselves, but living for what is to come. Living for a future generation, living for the hope of heaven. Now, many of you, especially those who are perhaps parents, grandparents, you get this. If you look at your schedules, if you look at the way you spend your money, how much of it is not for you? How much of it is being invested in your kids? And you may not see the benefits on it. How many of you grandparents are just pouring your life, your money, your time and resources into your grandkids, and you may never see the benefits of it? We have this inbuilt wire mechanism with us to live for a next generation. And it's powerful. And I want to encourage us to do it as a church. I've got to say, as the senior pastor here of this church, I am not creating a church for me. I'm too old. I'm 58 years old. If I create a church for me and my generation, we're dead in one generation. Because I'll be 78, 80, if I get that long here on earth. Who's going to come to that? I've got to create a church for the 28-year-old, for the 38-year-old, with their family, to pass on the generation, because I want Bridge Community Church to be here long after I've gone, and I want it to thrive, and I want it to be a witness and a testimony. Over 150 years, this church, not necessarily in this location, has been going because people have had that mentality. Let's pass it on. Even if we do not see the fulfillment of it, you know what? We're going to commit to it, because it's worth it for the future generations. And the future is what God had in mind. If we can click again on the next verse, verse 40. It says, for God had something better in mind for us, so that they would not reach perfection without us. Therefore, since we are surrounded by a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, the future is what God had in mind when dealing with these Old Testament Hebrew scripture heroes. They did not do too much wrong not to see the promise fulfilled or not to see their prayers answered. God is saying, no, I want to wait. I want the sense of inclusion. I want my whole family of generations to come together and enjoy all that I've got in store for you. Rather than seeing the benefits for a few here on earth, I'm going to wait so that my whole family, generations, nations, ethnic groups can really enjoy us. Uses this word perfection. When that's used in the book of Hebrews, it's the idea of the conquering of sin and death. And of course, all those people in the Old Testament, they didn't see that. We have seen it because we know about Jesus. Jesus, when he went to the cross, conquered sin, conquered that rebellion, conquered that selfishness. And then he went and conquered death because he rose again. This is part of this perfecting. But we still know it's still not quite there yet. We're still wrestling with stuff here on earth, but one day it will be complete and we'll all come together. But we do have some advantages over those Old Testament people. We know what it is to have the presence of God's Holy Spirit in our life, his empowerment, his enabling. And they're there cheering us on, as we see at the start of chapter 12, surrounded by a huge crowd of witnesses. This is sports stadium language. You know, this is where the crowd are cheering you on. And not like most crowds who are critical and shouting and they've never, done a sport in all their lives. That's why they're spectators. This crowd have been there, done it, seen it, got the t-shirt. And they are cheering us on. They are saying, do you know what? The life of faith is valid and it's worth it. Go for it. Push on and press on. So can I encourage you? Look back. Get stuck into the first part of the Bible. The Hebrew scriptures, discover these heroes of the faith. Learn from them. Can I encourage you perhaps to look into church history, get some biographies? I know they're absolutely instrumental in my life in my 20s, reading about the Hudson Taylors, George Mullers, and people like this. The way they lived their life, my faith went on to another level. Or could I dare to say, if you're not perhaps into the reading, have a look around this auditorium right now. There's one or two legends in this auditorium. Some of our seniors, they've been doing this Christianity and following Jesus stuff for decades. So perhaps you might not be into reading. Well, grab a cup of tea and go and see some of our seniors and learn from them. They're walking, talking, living examples of this stuff. And they're still with us and they're still going for it. What an encouragement. Connect with them. Look back. Be inspired to kick on in the things of faith. But also we should look out. So we'll click again, please. Thank you. Look out. Danger surrounds us. The writer to the Hebrews in the second part of verse 1 of chapter 12 said, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up. Let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. This is the practical outworking, if you like. The writer said, look back, but now look around. Put into practice what we're talking about. So again, this stadium race sporting event language is continuing here in this verse. And this would be something that would be so familiar to people in the first century of Rome, the Roman Empire, because they had a number of major sporting events. We know the Olympic Games. That was still going on back in the first century. But that was only one of 4 major sporting events that used to take place every few years. So people were familiar with this language. And the blue-ribboned event of these sporting events was always the running race. Not so much the 100-meter sprints, but more an endurance race. Perhaps not as long as our marathons, but it's that picture, it's that image in mind. It's not about speed, it's about stamina. It's about endurance. So this is the picture they have in mind here. And so as I think about marathon running, what do marathon runners wear? Are they kitted out like this? Nice heavy shirt, pair of jeans, and that? No. They have next to nothing on, these marathon runners, do they? Skinny little vest, tight shorts, and shoes, and that's it. Why? Well, they want to get rid of all the weight. Anything that would tire them out, weary them. Anything that would get in the way of them completing their event they have been set out for. Anything that could drain their stamina. They got rid of it. And also talks about looking around as well, seeing those things that could trip you up, maybe more of a cross-country race. Look out for those tree roots. Look out for those, spectators or whatever it is. Keep your eyes open. What is draining you? What is taking the energy? What is derailing you? Is it the cares of this world? Is it chasing the so-called dream, money, success, career, these kinds of things? Is that what's sucking the life out of us? Is there any way we can travel a bit more lightly? On Kerry's side of the family, they love their football. And her sister in particular, she's a big fan of Southampton Football Club. And occasionally she invites us over to go and watch a game. She's a season ticket holder. And we'll go and we'll jump in the car. And one thing I'm amazed at is the amount of stuff my sister-in-law takes to a football match. Seriously, I thought we were going up Everest. She loaded up the back of the car. And I thought, why do we need all this stuff? You know, is there a blizzard coming in? There was blankets, there was hot water bottles, there was flasks, in addition to multiple layers of clothing. And this was in June. And you're like, what's going on here? You know, every eventuality is covered in the back of my sister-in-law's car. And then she's passing it all on to us. And we're all staggering along to the stadium, you know, with all this stuff. You know, you'd think they didn't have any food or anything in there. It was incredible. That's the way she travels to football. And I can't cope with it. Because I'm a child of the 70s and 80s. You went to football and you needed your hands to be free. If you couldn't wear it, you didn't have it. Why? Because there could be missiles coming from the opposition fans. Yeah? Also, you needed to be free in case you had to run that police charge or the opposition fans come in. Oh, you kids don't have got a clue about what supporting a football team was in the 70s and 80s. You needed to travel light. And this is the picture. This is the imagery here. Get rid of the stuff. Disentangle. Run lighter. I really think there's a sense of duty here. It talks about run the race of endurance, the race God has set before us. I think some of us are trying to run 2 or 3 races. We're trying to run my race. Oh, God, thanks for your race. Thanks for that map. Thanks for that way you want me to go. Well, actually, I'll try this way. Or perhaps a race somebody else has imposed upon us. The expectations. Let's make sure we just run one race. Let's run the race God has got in store for us. That's why it's lovely hearing Hannah's testimony. She had her ideas, she's had her plans, and God seems to be taking her on his race. That's where we've got to be. And when we get on that race, let's get rid of the stuff that gets in the way. Let's travel a little bit lighter. Okay, lastly, let's move on. Look ahead as well. We do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. Because of the joy awaiting him, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame. Now he's seated in the place of honor beside God's throne. There's this challenge now from these verses. You're looking around. Don't forget to look forward. See the one who has done this race. See the one who's been obedient. See the one who's overcome. See the one who got the victory. See Jesus. And in a way, we're quite unashamed about this as a church. Our vision is about bringing about transformation in Bury St Edmunds and beyond, but there's a key phrase before that. We say we want to be a Jesus-centered people. Sure, we want the transformation, but the key to it is focusing on Jesus. Jesus is the ultimate transformer and restorer. Therefore, we need to learn his practice, his teaching, his ways. We write it down as our vision statement. This is our aim. This is our future. This is where we're going. And we try and reinforce it very much on our Sunday mornings. Like currently, we're going through systematically going through the Gospel of Mark. And the reason we're doing that is because I'm a bit thick. I know every page of the Bible. You can see Jesus there. But in the Gospels, I need it to hit me in the face. I need that teaching. I need to see that lifestyle to shape my thinking for the way I go ahead. And I believe it's so important for us as a church. So we will continue after this series to get back into Mark, to constantly get back to Jesus, because he is key. Why? Again, the word's there. He's the champion. He initiated and he perfected faith. This is who Jesus did. He lived the life of faith supremely and completely. He started it. He was the one who laid it down. He was the one who had the confidence in God and achieved it all by eventually even going to the cross and conquering death. That expression there, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame. Why did Jesus go to the cross? So much pain, but also so much shame. Sure, nails in the hands and the beatings, but the degradation of it all. Stripped, semi-naked, just left hanging. This is the Son of God. This is the one who angels worship, and the abuse and the degradation, the violation of him, horrific. But he saw the future. Do you see that? Because of the joy awaiting him. Jesus had this mentality, I will put up with anything here on earth because I know the future is so good in God. That heavenly future is so good. That thronement, that picture of a throne room, that picture of him being seated at the right hand of God, that picture of all his family coming together. It's worth it because of what the future will bring, is that Jesus mentality. And we see it again in the next verse, verse 3 as well. Think of all the hostility endured from sinful people, then you won't become weary and give up. At times, the life of faith, when people keep coming against you, is hard. When people at work and school and college are just bending your ear and making your life awkward and hard. When you're trying to live a clean, holy, spiritual life and everything seems to be coming against you. What's the antidote to this? Jesus. Think, consider, reflect on him. When we get tired, Jesus is also the adrenaline to get us going again by his Holy Spirit. Jesus is superior in every way. The way he lived his life, the way he loved, the way he taught, the way he spoke, the way he intervened. This is why we look to him. This is why we're challenged to disentangle our lives in order to follow him well and run that race well. In conclusion then, next slide please. What's the author and perfection of our faith saying to you today? We've looked at these verses. What is God saying to you today? And what is your response? What's your next steps? You're on this life race with Jesus. What are your next steps? Just 3 suggestions that have kind of struck me over this last week or so. Do we need to pause, rethink, recalibrate some of our priorities? Are they pulling us down our current list of things to do? Is it getting to us? Is it wearing us out? Do some of us need to shed some of that weight? Think of my sister-in-law taking all that stuff to a football game. Do we need to leave some of it in the car and just go? What is God saying to you there? Is there some stuff that just needs to be disentangled from? As you pause and reflect at your life, what's noxious? What's a nuisance to your life of running with Jesus in this life of faith, this race of faith? What is draining you? What is derailing you completing the race that Jesus has set before you? What are you going to do about it? It's been quite a wrestle for me as looking at this. And I know some things have had to shift and change, you know. A lot less screen time, I'm thinking. It can become such a distraction. A phone is a great help, but it can be such a distraction. Also, really grateful for Mark and his leadership of the trustees, his wisdom. As a staff back in June time, we were struggling. We were so overwhelmed about the weight of work just coming into our church. And the staff were virtually out on their feet, me included. And we were just saying, what can we do? And Mark, with great wisdom, just said, hey, every one of you has got to come up with 3 priorities, 3 things you need to focus 80% of your time on. Nail those down. That will help reduce the workload. Instead of saying yes to everything, instead of running around like headless chickens. And I found that wisdom incredibly helpful. So for me, that apostolic call to preach, teach, pray, as the senior leader of the church, that's my first priority. This is what I have to do and facilitate for our church. Secondly, we're talking about discipleship as well. In this coming year, I'm going to be part of 3 discipleship groups, 2 in this church, 1 with some other pastors here, to help our people become more and more like Jesus, to grow and develop people. This will become an important priority. And thirdly, provide the leadership so this place becomes a community hub, becomes that place of restoration and blessing for our community. These are the things that God has laid on my heart. So these are the things the elders have signed up and said, yes, David, go for it. I may do 1 or 2 other things, but they're always going to be subservient to those 3 things now. Priorities. Do you need to do some of that in order to just get rid of some of this stuff so we can run this race with Jesus in a sense of joy and lightness? Final slide from me, and then I'll hand back to Mark to lead us into a response time. I was listening to a podcast by Pastor Michael Todd in America, and he came up with some real gems here. He talked about finding our sweet spot, this rhythm of life, work, relationships, and rest, So often we overemphasize the work and the relationships, and we function in exhaustion rather than functioning out of rest. He talked about planning to run at God's pace of grace for your race. Too often we run at someone else's pace. One of the few times I've actually tried doing a half marathon, I remember I was in my 40s and I decided to run with the 20-somethings. By 8 miles I was dead and I still had another 5 miles to go. You know, run your race. Run the race that God has given you, not someone else's. Let's get that pace right. Sometimes we're looking for some brilliant strategy. Pastor Michael said, no, cut back, do less, be healthier enough to influence other people. Build some margin in our lives. Are you running in the red? Is it always in the red? The rev counter's gone through the roof. Build some margin. Don't miss the God moments. Don't miss the God meaning. Don't miss the God miracles. Be present in the present. Found this incredibly helpful in shaping what's coming up in these coming months. So yeah, we want to live a freer life, a more liberated life. Got to do some disentanglement. What is that going to look like for you? Thank you, Mark.